So, again, we're going to be talking about the French Revolution today, and we're going to discuss a lot of the beginnings and then get into some of the reasons why it happened. So, we'll go all the way through the rise of Napoleon and the fall of Napoleon through this unit. And so, we talked about it. In 1789, the French people were inspired by the American Revolution to rise up and to overthrow the Bourbon monarchy. They felt that they had seen a lot of problems, and they saw the example of the Americans overthrow the British government, so they thought we can do this too. They saw the corrupt nature of the monarchy, and they felt that the people, that they were out of touch with the people, that there was a disconnect. You know, probably how you feel with your parents sometimes, or with maybe a teacher or a principal or anybody, maybe your job. You don't feel like there's a connection between your boss and you, okay? Here's the conditions that they were living in. There was a vast majority of people that were poor and hungry. We talked about that with the food shortages because of the weather conditions. People had no say in government. When we talk about the estate system here in a minute, well, you'll understand why. And there were increasing taxes left the people in dismay. They were just frustrated because they didn't have any food and they didn't have any money. And they had no say in making anything better. And so overall, it was just not a very good place. Now remember, this is France where King Louis XIV, the Sun King, the absolute monarch, the most absolute monarch we'll ever talk about, had created France or made France into this great, glorious place. But all those great, glorious things that he had done had also left the country in shambles economically. They didn't have any money. They looked powerful. They seemed powerful. They seemed great. It was kind of like a illusion. They didn't really have those things. So King Louis XVI, his grandson, was distant from his people, and he kind of made people mad by showing off his wealth and power. They didn't like it. They'd grown tired of the absolute monarchy. And these people wanted the same ideals that the philosophers of the Enlightenment and the people that fought for the revolution in America wanted. Things like limited government, free speech, and fair treatment of people. They just things that we would think are normal, they wanted. Like you would look at that list and you go, yeah, why wouldn't they want those things? Problem was before this time, those things weren't real to them. You couldn't say what you want. You were not going to limit the government because it was an absolute monarchy. And fair treatment of people, people weren't treated fairly then. They weren't treated equally then. Those ideas start to develop now, thanks to the Enlightenment. And so one of the major things that helped this situation, I guess helped it make it worse, was the system of government that was in place called the estate system. And there were 3 estates, not estates, as I heard a lot of you say, the estate system. Okay? The first estate was made up of the clergy. Okay? That's the church. These will be the highest church officials from the Catholic Church. Oh. And you got to think back all the way to the Reformation, the split-offs and all those things. The church has kind of lost some power, but they are still respected in this country. They made up 1% of the population, but owned 10% of the land in France. And guess what? They didn't pay taxes. They were the most privileged estate. They set up things for the people. They set up education for and relief for the poor, but they didn't pay any taxes. And they were given a lot of privileges overall. So French society has been divided up, and the first of the estates this first group is the clergy or the church. Okay? The second estate is made up of the nobles. The nobility are the highest members of the army and the government. They make up 2% of the population, but own 20% of the land. And these people are rich. And guess what? They don't have to do. They don't have to work, but they also don't have to pay what? Taxes. Very privileged estate. So you have 2 privileged estates, and they make up 3% of the population. Well, there's only one more estate. So this is going to contain 97% of the population. And guess what they have to do a lot? Pay taxes. The third estate is made up of a group of two different people. The bourgeoisie, they are middle-class workers, wealthy merchants, doctors, lawyers, and people like that. So they've got money. Some so much that they had more money than the nobles. But they have to pay so much taxes, they don't really have that much money anymore. They're so taxed that they really can't run businesses profitable or make them profitable, run them with a profit mindset. And so they also have no say in government, and these are going to be the people that are very educated, very enlightened. They're going to lead the revolution. The peasants aren't enlightened. They don't really know. But they're going to follow people that they think are smart, kind of similar to what we do, right? Someone really smart tells you what to do, you just go do it. At least I do. So, that's the way that these were the smart people of the group. The peasants were the lowest class, and they actually rented land to farm from the nobles. So they didn't have really anything. They make up 80% of the third estate. And remember, the third estate makes up 97% of the population. So this is the largest group, period. Most people in France are poor, don't own land, and have to pay a lot of taxes, leaving them with basically nothing. They don't have anything. Some of them would go without because they had to pay so much taxes. So which estate is going to be the one that's frustrated? The third. They're the ones having to pay for all the problems, even though they have less. And so this is one of the main issues of the French Revolution, is that these people are not being treated fairly, and they see it. They have to deal with it all the time. You also have really, really bad leadership. This is King Louis XVI, the grandson of King Louis XIV, the ultimate absolutist monarch of France. Louis XVI reigned from 1774 to 1792. He would have been the guy that initiated the help for the American Revolution. But he was much weaker than Louis XIV. Remember, Louis XIV, the Sun King, has all the power, builds the Palace of Versailles, fights wars, expands France's empire, makes it the cultural center of the world. Louis XVI, he's just kind of there. He's an absolute monarch, and he makes a lot of decisions, and he does everything on his own, but he is not the king that King Louis XIV was. His dad, he would have died probably somewhere around 1773, 74. And so he has a lot of issues and abuses his power by making all the laws. He doesn't consult people. He has his own tax collectors, and he makes complete decisions of war and peace. So he's made all the problem. He is the one that's made all the decisions. So how much blame should he get? He should, right? That makes sense. He's really going to get none of it, right? It's not his fault. He doesn't need to pay for these things. Someone else does. So he institutes ways for him to get these things paid for. His reign is dominated by economic problems, mostly from helping the Americans. He's the guy that said, yes, we'll help the Americans fight against the British. Of course, France and Great Britain don't truly get along very well during this time period because of power. They want to both dominate. Again, he was a very weak leader. He allowed matters to drift on and on. He paid little attention to the government advisors. He made all his own decisions. He wasn't helped by his queen. He and his queen lived lavish lifestyles in the palace. They basically ignored the problems that were going on outside of Versailles. And why would you not want to leave this area? That's your house. I see these things on Instagram all the time. It says, you get $30 million and you get this island, but you can never leave. And I'm like, okay, I don't have to. I don't need to. I never need to leave ever again. I will be fine living on this island by myself. That's how these people had it. They lived with their friends. They had this huge palace. They never left. They ignored life outside the Palace of Versailles, and they make sure everyone sees it. They're like, hey, look at us. We're wealthy, and you're not. And Queen Antoinette, Marie Antoinette, the Queen of France, didn't make anything better. She's nicknamed Madame Deficit because she spends money about like the king does. But she spends it on her lavish lifestyle. She was unpopular from the moment she set foot inside of France. She's not from France. She's from Austria. And she spends money on gowns, jewels, gambling, and gifts so much that she gets a nickname for spending money. Be like Charlie. She spends a lot of money on clothes, right? Charlie doesn't even have any money anymore because she spends all her money on clothes. Food. Who's the person that spends all their money on clothes in here? Sarah. Yeah, there you go. Yeah. Most kids do. I did too. I never had money growing up because I spent it on junk. And then that junk broke, and then I didn't have the junk anymore. And then, yeah. So there's all these problems, all these issues. And the king finally has just had enough because the people are just, constantly bombarding him with issues. And so he calls something called the Estates General. What do you think is going to happen? No. They're going to meet, and they're going to do the politically correct thing and talk about it. Yeah. They're going to meet up. The estates are going to meet. They're going to send delegates from the 3 different estates that we just talked about. So from the church, from the nobles, and from the peasants and bourgeoisie. And they're going to talk about the issues. They're going to discuss France's national affairs with members of the 3 estates. Problem is that 2 of the estates are very privileged. How do you think they'll vote? Do you think they'll want to change things? Do you think the church and the nobles want to pay taxes? So they're not going to vote to change anything. And you only get 1 vote per estate. So if the first estate and the second estate vote together, who wins? They do, no matter what. So no matter what the third estate wants, if they can't get someone to side with them, they can't win. And that's the issue. They're 97% of the population, but they're the minority in terms of voting. So they're always overpowered, and this means the French people basically have no vote. No say in government, no voice. This was the first time this meeting had been invoked in 175 years, and it was held at the Palace of Versailles. So who's in charge at the Palace of Versailles? The king, right? Okay. So, after basically being told they have no voice because they know the first and second estates are going to vote for themselves, they demand more of a say. They're like, hey, we are 98%, 97% of the population. We need more votes than just 1. This doesn't make sense. And so they do what protesters do. They leave. They say, well, you can't run the country without us. We're supposed to vote at this thing. And this is like 9 months. The Estates General is like 9 months long. So in 1789, they walk out of this huge event, this thing that's supposed to happen. Okay, and they protest. And they created something called the National Assembly. They met for a couple of nights in a row. And they talked, and they talked, and they talked. And these passionate speeches eventually led them to say, why don't we just start making laws for ourselves? It would be about like you guys, the students, deciding to band together and vote on whatever and then presenting it to Mr. Horton, right? Yes. Of course you could. But at the end of the day, what does he get to do? Say yes or no, right? He does. He can do whatever he wants. He's in charge of the school, And so they create this National Assembly. They talk about creating laws, and that's all fine and dandy. But they passed their own laws and reforms, but it wasn't viewed as legitimate. So, like, again, y'all could come in and say, we're going to do this and we're going to do that. And Mr. Horton, you go, no, you're not. So the first estate, the second estate, and the king said, I don't really care. that you think you're going to be in charge now. Yeah, you've got 97% of the population, but you only got one vote still. So they're like, okay, well, we'll come back to the Estates General. We'll come back and meet with y'all. Now it says the king. King locked the doors. They walked back into the Estates General and they said, hey, y'all going to let us in? They said, no. They said, y'all walked out. You don't get a vote at all anymore. So now they went from having one vote to having 0 votes. Do you think this stopped them? No. What you have in front of you is a picture of the tennis court oath. Yes, they had tennis back then. I know, it's hard to believe. That's an indoor tennis court at the Palace of Versailles. Why is it what? Well, it would be in the inside, so. Yeah, I know, but they did. So here you have the tennis court oath, okay? And they're meeting to vow to create a constitution, okay? So they have said, fine, you lock us out, we're going to meet anyways. And we're coming together. And actually what happened is many of the other estates members start to kind of side with them, like, okay, let's get something done. It is kind of bad in France. Let's try to get something worked out. But they want to create a constitution which will limit the government. Who doesn't want that? Who's got all the power? The king. He doesn't want to be limited, right? He just wants you to vote with him. Let's get some taxes going. Let's get some money going so I can do what I want to do. Well, then the real crazy stuff is about to start happening. I know we talked about how things that you read influence you, right? But you know what influences you even more? Rumors. Right? We start telling rumors about people, then all of a sudden we get real crazy, right? We start gossiping, well, guess what starts happening? Some rumors start to fly. Okay? Rumors start to fly that the king is going to break up the tennis court protest with the military. And if you think the king's coming at you with the military, what are you going to do? You're going to what? You're going to fight back. You're leaving? No, you've talked about it too many times. I know you're going to fight, okay? So you're going to fight back. What do you need to fight back if you're going up against the military? Weapons. So there's fear. What? Hope. Yeah, that's true. I wouldn't want to fight our military. I agree. But, the thought is we've got a lot of people. Let's get some weapons. So these rumors start to fly, and people start freaking out. It'd be the same again if y'all had all these ideas and you want to change school, and then y'all have been talking bad about Wilson, and you've been talking bad about Mr. Horton, and then he comes in, y'all are all going to tighten up a little bit. Oh, we're in trouble. Oh, something's happened. And Sarah's like, yeah, I know for a fact. I'd be scared to death. Look, I get scared. No, you would. Yeah. He walks in the room, and I'm like, oh, yeah, they Mr. Horton? Yeah. So, again, that's just the way it goes. So the thoughts start getting into your mind. It's rumors. So now you're freaking out a little bit. So you're like, we got to get something. I got to keep myself safe. Well, it didn't help that he had already hired Swiss mercenaries, which are soldiers, to protect Paris. So the third estate's like, okay, we got to get some weapons. They start stockpiling guns and preparing for a battle. Well, there's this castle that they had converted into a prison called the Bastille. So on July 4th, a mob searching for gunpowder goes to the Bastille. They overtake it, overrun the guards, blast, just literally destroy it, not destroy it, but, break in, overwhelm the guards, and seize control of the building. They're so angry at these people that really didn't do anything. Remember, it's a prison. That they hacked the prison commander and the guards to death. Again, this is where it gets crazy. Cut their heads off, stick them on spears, or what they called pikes, and parade them around town. Yes, yay, look what we did. That's what they did. I tell you, it gets a little crazy. Okay? They did this as a symbol of the revolution. This is the first act of the French Revolution, and it's the true beginnings of it. It is now celebrated as Bastille Day, very similar to our July 4th. And so it's a unique day for them because they celebrate it as this monumental moment where they overthrew the government, the beginnings of their overthrowing the government. But it was all based on what? Rumors. We don't even know if the king was going to dismiss them or attack them. Rumors. Okay? So remember that, because tomorrow we're going to talk about how these events continue to spiral in a more radical way. All right? The next thing we're going to do is you make sure you keep up with your notes, because we're going to use them. We'll get all the way through. We're going to read about one of the most used devices of the French Revolution, the guillotine. You're going to read about how it was created today and answer a few questions on the back. What I will say about this reading, it is very similar to some ACT style readings. So in the future, you'll be taking the ACT. So if you're working on this at home, I would provide you 2 methods of how I would go about working on this assignment and how to complete it the quickest, fastest way. Okay? The first being to look at the questions on the back or on the second page if you're at home. Read through those questions to know what you're looking for, and then read the article all the way through. The other method would be to read the article all the way through and then look at the questions. The method that I would least promote is to read the article and skim for the answers because you know what the questions are. That one works when you are having a lot of time, but when you have multiple readings in the ACT, that's not a very good method. Okay? You want to be able to quickly find what you need, and skimming actually leads you to wasting time because you don't know what you're looking for. Okay? So read through this. It's got some pretty cool little details in there about the creation of the guillotine and its actions and why it was made and why it was favored in the French Revolution. If you have any questions at home, make sure that you email me, and have a great day.